Today's devotional is entitled The Cost of Christianity. As we drive through cities and towns, we look at the buildings that are all around us, and sometimes these buildings just tower over us. They're a marvel of engineering. The amount of time and resources used to create these behemoths of buildings just staggers the mind. And we see a direct result of the use of the resources and the time that people put in to put these things together to build them up. And we also see in the same cities and towns beside these buildings, construction that is in the processes of being done, the skeletons of the buildings with bare metal frames that are the complete opposite of the buildings around them. Not complete, but ugly. And these incomplete buildings almost look like a ghost town, that sometimes there's not even a soul to be found working on them. And as we drive by or walk by them, we really pay them no attention. Work stoppages do happen after all. And in this world of increasingly longer delays due to material shortages, it's almost par for the course that what they say is going to take 6 months inevitably ends up taking 2-3 times longer. But as we continue to drive by these buildings over the months, something starts to become very apparent to us. That the construction boss didn't account accurately the cost of the materials, and the job is done. It's unfinished and ugly. So many times as Christians, we do the same thing. That we go into things with the desire to see them to completion. That we get this fire lit under us, that the Holy Spirit is working through us and gets us pumped up, so to speak. That we're on the mountaintops ready to share the gospel and share the good news, ready to serve at church, or ready to make that step into mission work, or even ready to share the gospel with that person at work that you've been praying for. And once you start this journey, you don't count the cost of what it takes for you to go through with it. And suddenly the desire, the heart, the motivation is gone, and despair, discouragement, and apathy sets in. You see, Jesus even speaks about this, that we don't count the cost of discipleship, that the grand plans that we have for the kingdom fall short. And we see in Luke chapter 14, verses 28 through 33. Luke 14, 28 through 33. He says, "For which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, 'This man began to build and was not able to finish.' Or what king going out to encounter another king in war will not sit down first and deliberate whether he is able with the 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with the 20,000? And if not, while the other is yet a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. So therefore, any of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple." Here, Jesus says, if you don't count the cost of what you're doing, it's going to fail. You know, here Jesus is telling us that the cost of Christianity is more than what people realize, that what most people realize when they decide they're going to follow Christ. You see, it costs more than a Sunday morning pew. It costs more than a kind word to somebody at work that you don't necessarily have a problem with, you just have great conversations with, or even a few pennies to the person on the side of the road. The cost of what we do as Christians costs us everything. You see, the disciples that started to follow Jesus had a hard time hearing this. And we see in Luke chapter 6, verse 60, it says, when many of his disciples heard it, they said, "This is a hard saying. Who can listen to it?" And we see in the continuation of verse 66, after this, many of his disciples turned back and no longer walked with him. They didn't take into account the cost that it was going to cost them when it comes to following Christ. You see, the message that Jesus was speaking to these people initially had them so excited that they saw his healing abilities, and the way that Jesus spoke to them made them feel as though Jesus was just talking to them one-on-one. But once they realized what Jesus was really telling them to do, they scattered. You see, we do the same thing. We encounter people on a daily basis that as Christians we are to love and care for, and yet The perceptions the people that we're around see us associate with those people causes us to shy away, hoping that the next person is going to come along and help this person. And to be more like Jesus every day and less like ourselves is a struggle that we deal with every single day. We have a desire to be like Jesus, but we also have a desire to continue to be ourselves. You see in 1 John chapter 2, verse 6, it says, whoever says he abides in him ought to walk in the same way in which he walked. We cannot repeat what Christ did on the cross, as we don't have the power to be able to come back from the dead. But we are to emulate Christ in our qualities and in our manners, in qualities of faith, love, piety, obedience, and self-sacrifice. We're to show these qualities and characteristics every single day. And the more we act in this manner, it becomes more and more easy for us to do it. Suddenly, the perceptions of the people around you don't mean anything to you because you're not worried about what they're saying, but you're worrying about what Christ is saying. Jesus tells us exactly what we are to do to become one of his disciples. We see back in Luke chapter 14, verse 27, he says, whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Let that sink in. Whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. We are to not become ourselves, but we're supposed to become like Christ. That the cost of the things that we want to do in this world definitely do cost a lot. But the cost of becoming a disciple, the cost of Christianity is so high, but the reward is so much better. So the question that you need to ask yourself today is, are you willing to pay the cost to follow Christ? Or are you going to be like the many disciples that do cling to Jesus' word and are marveled at what he was able to do, but then realize the true cost involved and just scatter? To say, that's not for me. I'm going to live like myself 6 days out of the week. I'm going to give God Sunday. I'm going to sit on that Sunday morning pew. I'm going to pray to God. I'm going to have the tears come down my face, be repentant of who I am, only to go back to it the next day. The cost of Christianity is so high, but the rewards are even higher. That is the devotional for today. The cost of Christianity.